Day 11 of the Diddy trial, and we've got the cops and the stylist. Hi, I am Melba Pearson, also known as the Resident Legal Diva, and it is time for another Daily Diddy, bringing you Diddy trial updates every day until we get a verdict. So first up today was LAPD officer Chris Ignacio. So he was a 16-year veteran of the force that was working out of the Hollywood division in late 2011 when he got a call about a possible break-in at Kid Cudi's house. So when he got to Kid Cudi's home, he saw a table with Christmas gifts on it, some of which were open, some of which were not. That backed up Kid Cudi's testimony when he said that he had Christmas gifts that were wrapped and that when Diddy broke into his house, he opened some of them. So that's consistent. And the police observations were really critical, again, to really back up Kid Cudi's credibility in his testimony on the stand. Also, the officer did notice a car that was leaving the scene of the break-in, and he memorized the license plate number. Good thing he did, because the car was registered to who? Bad Boy Productions, which is registered to Diddy. So that is super important because, again, for RICO, you have to show that the enterprise is basically using their resources for criminal activity. So if you have a car that's linked to Bad Boy Productions, which is an enterprise of Diddy's, and it was at the crime scene of, at the scene of a crime, that is another step towards getting RICO. Also, on cross-examination, the defense was able to establish that the call was not reported as a burglary, nothing was stolen, and there were no reports of a threat to kill anyone. At the end of the day, does that mean a ton? But they got it out anyway. Next up was arson investigator Lance Jimenez. Now, he was the one who was dispatched to Kid Cudi's house after the Molotov cocktail incident. So the interesting thing here is that Cudi lucked out because when the Molotov cocktail was thrown in the car, the glass didn't shatter. If the glass had shattered, that car would have gone up like a bomb. So the damage was much more minimal than clearly was intended. But the arson investigator made it very clear that this was an intentional act, this was not an accident, and that it was a targeted crime with the goal of committing serious damage. Now, in a very dramatic moment, the defense was really got up in arms on this one because the fingerprints that were pulled from the whole scene ended up being destroyed. And defense objected because they were like, you're making it seem like Diddy had something to do with that. So in addition to objecting, the defense asked for a mistrial, basically to be like, toss this trial out, start again, because the jury already heard about the fingerprints being destroyed. They're already going to have this inference in their head, all of that. The judge was like, no, I'm not going to give you a mistrial, but I'm going to direct the jury to disregard any testimony in terms of the fingerprints and all of that. Because basically, the defense can't have it both ways. If the prosecution hadn't brought out that the fingerprints were destroyed, the defense was going to come back on cross and be like, you guys did a crappy investigation, this and that. You basically allowed evidence to get lost. So, prosecution had to bring it up. How are you going to penalize them for that, generally? So there was that. Now, also, the arson investigator Jimenez had a hard time reaching Capricorn or Cassie, clearly because they were instructed not to talk to law enforcement. Witness tampering, which leads to obstruction of justice, that's another issue for part of the whole RICO in terms of using resources from the company to further criminal activity, or basically cover up criminal activity. So next up was Deontay Nash, who was a stylist that worked with both Diddy and Cassie. Now, Nash is one of the few people that actually did something because him and Mia, who's identified as another survivor in this case, they both jumped on Diddy while he was beating Cassie. So he talked about that. He also talked about how Diddy would refuse to release Cassie's music anytime he got mad at her. So he's like, oh, your little mixtape isn't going to come out if I hear anything from your smart mouth, things like that. So again, that goes towards the coercion aspect, because if she didn't do what he wanted her to do, he was holding over her head her music career. So you've got that. Nash also talked about how Diddy had threatened Cassie's parents sometime around 2012 and 2013. And also, he was threatening Cassie that he was going to release sex tapes of her in the freak off, first off to her parents' job. So to make sure her parents got fired, and then of course release it more broadly to destroy her career. Again, that goes back to extortion and coercion, because again, if she stepped out of line, didn't go to a freak off or anything like that, there were broader consequences for everyone. Of course, she started freaking out and crying. Nash tried to comfort her and she was like, no, he's not on the video. It's just me and the other guys. Again, really, really problematic. Of course, this was never repeated to the police, never reported, to the police, but Nash did tell Diddy's chief of staff, and of course, as you can imagine, nothing happened. So there's that. Nash also backed up everything that Cassie said in terms of her not wanting to participate in freak-offs, but going because Diddy demanded it of her. He gave multiple examples of that. He also talked about how Cassie tried to get away from Diddy when he was mad and trying to beat her. Oh, in one instance, she tried to basically climb over her balcony of the hotel to get away from him. Despite all of this, Nash says that he doesn't hate Diddy or have ill will towards him. Like, WTF, what kind of cult is this that you can watch people get beat, threatened to get killed, all of that, and you're not, and you're still okay with that? Like, that just speaks a lot to the hold that he seems to have over everyone. But in good news, Cassie gave birth yesterday to a healthy child 2 weeks after getting off the stand. Nash actually did speak to her and congratulate her and all of that. So there's some good news there. He is back on the stand tomorrow. And of course, I'll be back with more details. Take care.